All right. Steve Scaer, welcome to the Grant Discourse.
Thank you, Craig. It's a pleasure to be here.
You're an activist.
Yes, I am.
I found you on X and I found you on Facebook. And I've seen some of your videos online where you've been out in the street raising awareness about the transing of children.
Yeah, for years I've been fighting the medical transition of minors.
And where did you get your start? I think I saw online that you are a special needs teacher.
Yes, I slid into it based on several things. One is when this came up, I was a special ed teacher, and I was seeing my students, especially girls with autism, getting pulled into it. They would show no signs of being uncomfortable with their sex, and they'd go to an after-school GSA meeting and come back with all of the colors and declaring themselves trans. I also was just the moment we had gender identity laws, I was fighting those because I didn't want to have to pretend that 2 + 2 = 5. And so I started speaking out against this. In the midst of this, our niece got pulled into this. She was one of the early ones. She needed mental health help. Instead, they gave her testosterone. It only made her situation worse, and she spiraled into mental illness, drug use, homelessness, and she died of an overdose. She had been talking about suicide. So I still had no plans of hanging out on the streets. Abigail Shrier's excellent book, Irreversible Damage, The Transgender Craze Seducing Our Daughters, came out. And I thought, wow, this is a great book because it describes just what happened to our niece. And so I paid to get 3 billboards put up advertising this book. One of them, the people of Derry, New Hampshire, the Democrats, managed to get taken down. They did not want this book promoted. Another one that I put up in my hometown of Fort Wayne, Indiana, just got paintballed over for a while, just vandalized the equipment. Another stayed up, but the business it was on top of ended up getting vandalized. And so I thought, well, I've got my own signs. I'll just go out if you're not going to let me have a billboard, and I'll stand holding the signs myself. And then I realized pretty quickly that I better have, for my safety, a camera on, and that led to making a few videos and posting those.
What did the billboard say? Was it just promoting that book?
Yes. It said, what your daughters are learning in school. Learn about what your daughters are learning in school, along those lines. But mainly it was just a copy of the book cover.
How long were you a special ed teacher?
I still am. I think I'm 30-some years.
So you've been working with kids for a long time then.
As well as nonverbal autistic adults, too. So I've worked a lot with autism, and the autistic kids are the main ones being targeted.
And you said that you had a student that went to an after-school program?
It happened to several students, but there was one in particular that it was so sudden, it really struck me that she was really happy being she was an especially feminine girl, and she liked those things. And if you're autistic, you're not comfortable with your body, and you don't fit in with the other students really well. And she went to one of these meetings and she felt loved and accepted, and suddenly she belonged to a group, and that was it. So I don't know. That was happening shortly before I left, so I don't know what she's gone through now.
What year was this?
This was, I think it was the first half of 2020.
Okay.
So it was a school year that ended abruptly.
And is that when you first started participating in activism to raise awareness about this?
I first started raising awareness about this when I was fighting the gender identity laws, and that goes back to 2017 and 2018.
Now, is that in New Hampshire? or were they trying to?
Sure. Well, these laws went through. Our gender identity law, which was signed by Governor Sununu, says that we can't discriminate against someone based on their gender identity. And the law defines gender identity as a person's gender-related identity. So this whole thing's circular to begin with, but essentially says in a lot of contexts, we have to, if a man says he's a woman, then we have to pretend that he is. And you can extend that to if your daughter says she's your son, then she's your son. The other law was a conversion therapy ban, which sounds, I mean, who wants conversion therapy, right? And you picture electric shock treatments. And what this law actually did was a gender identity was recognized as something that was immutable, like your skin color, something that was never, ever going to change. And any effort to change the gender identity would result in suicide, is the story that they've been peddling. And what this law really means is it's a crime to tell a girl who's confused about her sex that maybe she's a girl, or to explore being a girl. Why don't you like being a girl? The conversion therapy ban does that. That's still on the books.
But it's okay to help them reaffirm their gender as, like if it's a girl, that it's a boy?
The law specifically protects that any efforts to affirm a child's gender identity, the law won't apply to that.
I didn't know that was in New Hampshire. Since 2017?
That was signed into law in 2018.
2018.
So it really ties any therapist's hands. And part of the reason is the people who push transgenderism and want transgender to be a protected group with special rights, they need to make it like skin color. And of course, kids change their minds about things all of the time. But this prevents kids from getting the help they might need to change their minds. What it does with laws what wouldn't otherwise happen in reality.
What is the process for what is happening where, like, if there's a kid in school and they are confused about their gender, and where does the process start where their gender is starting to be reaffirmed as the opposite sex, if they're a boy and they think that they're a girl?
It's happening in schools, and it's also happening in pediatricians' offices in secret from the parents. In schools, in any public schools, including some charter schools, you'll walk around and you'll see stickers with, say, safe space.
Mm-hmm.
They're anything but. What that means is this is a teacher who will affirm your gender identity. And a lot of these teachers see themselves as heroes. They want to liberate these children from repression, including from their parents. And so the kids that are confused about the gender identity will start hanging out at these school safe spaces where they will be affirmed, and that won't be communicated with the parents. And the schools will often begin using new pronouns or a name, or in Manchester, a change of clothes, again, keeping that from the parents. And once they're working with the teachers, they're probably also going to work with a school psychologist. Something else that happens is the American Academy of Pediatrics, probably more than any other group, has been pushing transgenderism and has written a policy that's just made up out of nothing. It doesn't even make much sense. So any pediatrician is expected to be on board with this. And I have a friend whose daughter was secretly affirmed repeatedly by the family physicians at a Catholic medical group. So he felt really betrayed. So the moment she turned 18, she was on track to get the hormones and the mastectomies.
And they're doing that in New Hampshire. There's proof that it's happening here.
Yes, it's happening.
It's happening everywhere now. So the American Pediatrics Association, they're putting policies out in support of this. What science are they using to support it?
The American Academy of Pediatrics in 2018 accepted a new policy that was written by an activist, Jason Rafferty, who was already doing experiments on kids with puberty blockers and hormones. And what's mainly is behind this as science are the Dutch studies that were carried out in Amsterdam 2011 and 2014, where they followed a cohort of children that they gave these treatments to and then claimed that they had good outcomes. The biggest difference, the study has some serious flaws, including they downright cheated by switching some scales. They didn't look at medical health outcomes. But the other thing that they did is they really carefully sorted out who was going to be in this study. They didn't want anyone who was seriously depressed or had serious anxiety or trauma. And they didn't want any autistic children because they said in the study themselves that people with autism often feel like they're misfits and might mistake the discomfort they have in their body for a gender dysphoria problem. Those things, when these practices were started at Boston Children's Hospital, they threw that out. And the model that we have now that was put in place by the American Academy of Pediatrics says that children know their gender identities inherently. So this is very much a religious idea that it's sort of like a divine revelation. They unmistakably know their gender identities, and they get to call the shots. They decide what treatments they need, the puberty blockers, the hormones, and they push the suicide myth too. So if you don't affirm things right away, then these kids are going to die of suicide.
Yeah, because I've heard that would you rather have a trans kid or a dead kid?
Yes.
How many kids that go through this end up regretting it? Is there a statistic on that?
No one is keeping track of the regret rates. Often trans activists will throw out like a 1 or 2 detransition regret rate, but those are based on adults. They're short term, and about a third of them were lost in follow-up. And often they're measuring things that have nothing to do with regret or detransition. For example, in the main feeder into this study, the detransitioners, and these were adults, needed to report. They already needed to be on cross-sex hormones. They needed to report back to the same clinic that transitioned them in the first place, and then be put on opposite sex hormones. Now, we know, and it makes sense, a detransitioner isn't going to go back to the same clinic. That would be nuts.
Because they don't trust that clinic?
Yes, these are the people that harm them. There are exceptions. I have a few friends that said, hey, this isn't working out for me. And they find out pretty quickly they can't help them. I think a survey said about 25% of them went back. So no one's measuring regret. We also don't know for tracking how many kids start hormones and just drop away, just don't do it anymore. No one's been doing long-term tracking of long-term outcomes since Boston Children's Hospital started doing this in 2008, I think it was, and then it just skyrocketed. These kids haven't been enrolled in any sort of a clinical study. But I would also, regret isn't a good metric of health. That you can look at videos of people that are on the street abusing drugs, and the interview will say, do you have any regrets? And they don't regret taking the drugs. They have no idea of what they may have missed out on. Then there's the cognitive dissonance because they've invested so much into this, and it's their entire community. So the point of healthcare isn't to not experience regret. It's health, and something no one's monitoring is the health effects. And we know that giving kids cross-sex hormones and puberty blockers is just devastating.
How young are these kids when it starts?
Dartmouth Health, in a workshop, said they're starting kids on puberty blockers at 10 years old. We know it's happening to kids at 8 in other parts of the country. I don't know what the earliest that clinics give kids in New Hampshire, but definitely by 10.
10. And they think that the adults are saying that the kids know definitively that they're trans.
You'll get two different stories often at the same time. One is that the kids know definitely that they're trans. And if you've gone to the hearings, you'll hear that again and again. The children know who they are. But at the same time, these things were sold, and it was Dr. Turco, who was running the first gender clinic at Dartmouth, that this just gives kids puberty blockers are a pause, they're safe, they're fully reversible, and it just gives them some time to think. But every study we have, that the kids that go on puberty blockers go on to take the cross-sex hormones, virtually every one, like 98%. And by then, too, the parents have made up their minds that my child is transgender.
So it starts with puberty blockers and then goes to, what are they called, cross-sex?
Yeah, cross-sex hormones that you would, giving a girl testosterone and giving a boy estrogen.
Oh, so first they block it. First they block puberty, and then they start changing it so that you start producing the opposite of what you would normally produce. Mm-hmm. Do I have that right?
Yes, and it really starts with what they call social affirmation, and everyone knows of situations like jazz, and we have them in New Hampshire. Little children will believe what you tell them, and from the time they're toddlers, you're raising them to think that they're transgender, that they're the opposite sex. And Dartmouth Health recently has said, we don't just do medical interventions, that we give other ones too. Well, these other ones include this social transition. And these social transitions are part of the medical package, that they're socially transitioned, they're confused kids, then they're put on the puberty blockers and the cross-sex hormones. And that's why schools doing this in secret, this big intervention of socially affirming someone's gender identity, that's a dangerous thing.
So that social aspect of it is really the first step right there.
Yes.
And how that'll start when they're toddlers?
In New Hampshire, that started with several children when they were toddlers. Some of the moms who are most active have testified about it.
Is there a percentage of toddlers that identify as transgender?
There's no real statistics about any of these things, and some of the statistics that have been published in major medical associations are absolutely dishonest, some of the surveys, but no one's actually kept track of the numbers from the very beginning. But as people say, it's a transgender child is like a vegan cat. You know whose idea this was?
Parents. So you've been to a lot of the state house hearings when it comes to the legislation. What are those like?
The very nice thing about going to a state house hearing is that you normally get a chance to speak. There's been one hearing that I went to where I was shut down by committee members who were shouting over me saying I was being transphobic, and the chairman agreed and interrupted me. But in general, you get to talk. But the activists that are there can be still pretty ugly. That Beth and I, my wife Beth is involved in this too, that people will take their signs and they'll shove against you, push against you with their signs. And one woman who's not around anymore, after I spoke, I was just standing in the hall talking to a friend and shoulder checked me in the hallway.
Wow.
So it's an ideology that not only brings out the worst in people, but for people that have aggressive tendencies, it gives them a mask, a justification for attacking and hurting other people.
How many activists show up to these hearings on both sides?
For some of the hearings early on, it was Beth and me and maybe one or two other people. Lately, it's been a lot more people speaking against it. About 2 years ago, it peaked, and they had to have 2 days of hearings at the State House in the chamber because so many people wanted to speak. And I couldn't keep track of what was all the people that were speaking. I think it was a hearing that started early in the morning, like 8 or 9. And I didn't speak until 3 p.m. and people went on the following day. And almost all the people were, most of the people were speaking for the transgender cause.
Really?
Yep. But lately, in the last hearing, a lot fewer.
In support of the transgender cause. Have your numbers grown at all?
Quite a bit. The group that I worked really closely with this year was the LGB Courage Coalition. And some of them were flying in or driving in from Boston, and they really took the lead on the bills that we have now banning the use of puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones and mastectomies for minors. And they were really good about showing up. And when a few people speak up, it gives other people the courage to speak up too. So at some of these hearings, we probably were equal. We were pretty well matched.
Is there anybody on your side that are in the medical field?
There's a few, and I wish I could remember their names. But one of them, who was affiliated, I think, with Dartmouth Health, came and spoke against it, and I thought that was a very brave thing to do. Actually, she spoke for the bills restricting this, and there's been a few counselors there. But it's really tough for doctors. Sometimes I stand outside of Boston Children's Hospital, which pioneered these treatments with a sign, or Dartmouth Health, and even other places, and doctors will tell me in whispers, really quietly, that they support me and they believe what's going on there is wrong. But here's the problem. These are people that are graduating with hundreds of thousands of dollars in medical debt.
Yep.
And if they don't play ball on this, bad things will happen. The worst situation was a doctor in Texas, Ethan Hayem, who was a surgeon, and he saw that Texas Children's Hospital was illegally doing this. The Department of Justice, then under Biden, went after him, and he ran up $2 million just defending himself against charges that were absolutely specious. They weren't even holding their story together. So fortunately, Trump put an end to that, but he still got a lot of bills to pay. So they will be speaking out against this. If you're a doctor, you're a psychologist, it's a dangerous thing to do. All of this transgenderism doesn't make any sense. No one can really tell you what a transgender child is without going in circles. So it's a religion, I'd argue a cult, and it rests on coercion. So anywhere you are, it's going to be coercion, whether you're teaching in a public school. Even the people that I see in the street, they'll say, if I'm making videos, I'm not going to talk to you on camera. I may lose the job. And the closer you are to it, the greater the coercion. That's certainly true of the medical field.
So the hospital in Texas was doing it illegally, and the Justice Department went after the doctor that exposed it?
Yes, under saying that he, by sharing the aggregate data as a whistleblower, he violated HIPAA laws. Now, he was very careful not to do that as a whistleblower, but they were just going, the process is the punishment, right? And they'd already managed to keep this going for over a year with a threat of jail.
Wow. What is the motivation for these medical establishments to push this if there's no real, true science behind it? Is there any truth? I mean, that you say if it's all kind of manipulated data, right? Like, what is the motivation?
First of all, when I go to the hearings, when they were talking about banning puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones for children, Dartmouth Health testified that they would have a lot more trouble hiring endocrinologists in the state if the law went through. Well, why is that? Is it possible that this is a big moneymaker for endocrinologists? That there's quite a bit of money in this? And it's not just, they can say, well, we don't have that many children. But you got the children, then you're going to have a lifelong patient once you start this. They'll be dependent on hormones for the rest of their lives. The other part of it is there was an ideological capture of the American Academy of Pediatrics and of the other major medical societies like the American Psychological Associations. So these are true believers. For example, in Matt Walsh, the movie, have you seen the movie What is a Woman?
Yeah.
Okay. At one point, he's interviewing a therapist, and he asked, do chickens have gender identities, essentially? And she responded, do chickens cry? Well, she was on the very small committee that developed this for the American Academy of Pediatrics. So this is a religion it's founded in Marxism, because reality is immaterial. Our reality is shaped by social and economic forces that are created by the white capitalist patriarchy. You can't trust your senses. So that whole group managed to do the ideological capture of these major institutions. And I think part of the reason, other than money, is these are true believers. Also, there's been the LGBT lobbies have been massively funded by corporations. And the hospitals get a rating from GLAAD, one of these associations. And they've always been very conscious about getting high ratings from these activist groups. So that's another motivation.
What corporations have been funding this?
I don't want to start naming the court. That's something I didn't come prepared to. Yep. Okay. I don't want to tick them off, but pretty much every major corporation, and I know that because I want to make a point that I'm not investing in this stuff, and I know that my investment options are very, very narrow.
Mm-hmm. So the puberty blockers, they say that they're reversible and that they don't have any long-term effects. Is that true?
From what we know, it's not true. First of all, we just don't have any long-term studies of these. The information we have is based on precocious puberty. Let's say all of a sudden you have an 8-year-old girl who's developing prematurely. Mm-hmm. And so they might give her Lupron, it's also a chemically castrating drug, for a short period. She catches up in age, and then they take her off.
So that's a legitimate reason to use the puberty blockers, and then you would take them off of it.
Yes. And that's something that to some degree has been tested. When they say it's safe and we've been using it for years, it's been used for that purpose. What hasn't been studied is let's shut down puberty completely, mm-hmm. so that someone never goes through puberty. And it looks like the information we have about that tells us bone health problems, which is no surprise. And there's a lot of evidence that there's cognitive problems with cognitive development because of puberty blockers too.
Cognitive
development. And there's some things that have been uncomfortable to talk about in some settings, like the State House, that the organization that sets the standard for this is WPATH, World Professional Association for Transgender Health. And the former president, Marcy Bowers, said that any child early in puberty that's been given puberty blockers has never been able to experience orgasm. Mm-hmm. So these kids, you're destroying their sexuality completely. Little boy who's put on this is going to have a micro penis for the rest of his life. That was actually covered in the reality show Jazz, that they were going to do a vaginoplasty on Jazz, but they didn't have enough tissue to do it. So
Jazz?
Jazz Jennings. I Am Jazz.
No.
It's a reality show that really inspired a lot of people, very popular, about a little boy whose mother identifies him as a girl. And right now he just was finishing Harvard, so his life all the way through college with us. But that was something that happened when I talked about the Dutch studies of 2011 and 2014, where they were doing these to kids. They only picked 70 people, and one of them died. And it was a boy who was put on puberty blockers and testosterone, where they were going to give him a vaginoplasty, a false vagina. They had to use part of his bowel because he didn't have enough tissue. If an adult man gets this treatment, they use the penile tissue and the scrotum. But they didn't have enough tissue, so they had to use bowel, and that resulted in sepsis, an infection that killed this person. Now, normally, if you've got one person out of 70 who dies of a medical treatment who otherwise would have lived, you'd say, this treatment isn't a good idea.
That's sad. It was unnecessary.
It's sad and it's horrible. And the other thing that's really sad is with these kids, and they're often brought up to testify, look how happy my transgender daughter is. They'll never, because they never develop sexually, they'll never have sexual thoughts, true romantic feelings, that whole aspect of human existence. They can't understand. And we talk about not regretting. That's something they can't conceptualize that they're missing.
It's kind of ironic, though, because the whole point of it is to pretty much interfere with their sexual identity to begin with, you know? So the conversion that they're going through as a young person is going to affect them for the rest of their lives. They'll never experience anything that a normal person would once you go through puberty. Like if you have a sex change operation, aren't you basically sterilized for the rest of your life? Like you couldn't have children?
Yes, if you have an operation on your genitals, usually that's true. And with women, it begins with the testosterone, because if a female takes testosterone, it inevitably makes a hysterectomy inevitable because of the atrophy that will cause. But this whole movement is fraught with contradictions, ironies, and one of the biggest ones I get is why don't you let children be? Why don't you accept them as who they are? People will come to me and say that, and I'm the person who wants to accept them as they are. If you listen to the stories about the State House, the moms have testified that I knew my son was my daughter because he refused to play with the toy test truck that his grandmother got him for Christmas, didn't show any interest in that. He liked pink. He liked his hair long. And he made a dress out of a blanket or a tea towel. Now, what do these things have to do with being a girl? Does that mean a girl that likes to play in the mud and climbs trees and likes dinosaurs, does not like her hair long, hates wearing dresses? Does that mean she's less of a girl? And then it gets so that's the big irony. It's supposed to be about accepting people, but it's based entirely on regressive stereotypes and not respecting or accepting children as they are. So if a boy is effeminate, he's not doing a good job of being a boy. So we're going to block his puberty and try to change his sex.
Yeah, so you're not accepting your child for who they are. And like my daughter likes tractors. That doesn't mean that she isn't a girl. It means that she likes tractors because I let her sit on my lap while I drive the tractor around in the yard. So it's actually something that she's picking up from an experience with her dad, you know. So that it's wild to me that some people would take that as a signal that they might be a boy, or they might think that they're a boy.
Well, people aren't coming up with this idea themselves. This whole idea that, first of all gender is stereotypes. No one can give you a definition of gender that isn't circular or based on stereotypes. And those were the ones from the State House that I mentioned. And that Boston Children's Hospital said, you know, your toddler might be trans if you have a toddler girl who tries to pee standing up, a boy who fights getting a haircut, or they play with opposite sex toys, then these kids might be transgender. So it's all based entirely on stereotypes. And then the implication of this, too, is that a man who likes pink would be less manly than a man who's a lumberjack or whatnot. So it's all based on stereotypes. It's all regressive.
And it's promoting the exact opposite of what they claim that they are against, it seems like.
It is. It's not accepting of children, of people at all.
Wow.
Saying you're not perfect as you are. We're going to sacrifice your health and try to reshape your body to the sex that we think you should be.
Isn't it true that something like 30% of children now identify as trans?
I don't think it's that high. I think you can go to, I think I've read in specific schools, in specific settings, it's true. If you look at the youth risk survey by the CDC, I think it comes in around 1 to 3%. And it's tougher to say because some of them say they're not sure or they're questioning.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So has it been something that's been increasing over a certain amount of time?
Well, we know that it's skyrocketed
because it's promoted.
Yeah. We also know it's going higher, and like in some college campuses, it's tremendously high.
Did it start with gender? I mean, the first time I think I heard of it was probably the early 2010s when it came to gender studies in colleges, which I'd never heard of gender studies before then. And that's when I first started learning about trans people. And you didn't hear about it. It was unheard of in children. It was something that people were doing in their 20s. And then Caitlyn Jenner came out, or Bruce Jenner, Caitlyn Jenner, came out and was a woman all of a sudden, one woman of the year, and then it was everywhere. And ever since then, I feel like it's been skyrocketing. So are we seeing that people that were going to college 15 years ago learning gender studies are now in public schools teaching children? Could that be a correlation?
Well, of course, kids are bombarded with this message at school. As far as it starting, I think it really started with the Dutch experiments and then Boston Children's Hospital coming up with this model that kids have this gender identity. And then we went from having one gender clinic to just having hundreds across the country. So, and at that point, it tells you that there's a whole lot of money involved if a whole bunch of gender identity clinics, gender clinics are opening up. And this really became popularized with the TV show I Am Jazz. That a lot of young people will say it inspired them. And it correlates, too, with the rise of smartphones and the internet, that these kids are really getting pulled in by the internet, especially the kids with autism, the kids that are sitting at home. And it's a promise, a panacea that you will be your authentic self. And the way the kids are going to get love bombed, you belong to a group with certain hairstyles and colors. You got paraphernalia, too. And and some of the things that they give you will make you feel great. That a friend of mine, Katie, who's a detransitioner who's been speaking, she said that when she took testosterone, it was probably the best she felt in her life. So you get that too. It's not changing your sex or becoming your authentic self, but testosterone will just give you a great feeling.
Yeah, it probably gives you a lot more energy.
Right. When you go into a school, you can see these things everywhere. If you see a transgender flag, the pride flag, and it's got the transgenderism, that's an acknowledgement that somehow a girl can be a boy can be a girl. Mm-hmm. So right away, it's saying that we believe in this cult and this religion. And you'll often see posters promoting this. There are classrooms that are bedecked with transgender pride things, and the teachers will affirm gender identities and give ad hoc sermons on gender identities to their classes. So it's everywhere.
I had a friend who had a daughter in a school in Maine, and his daughter told him that whenever there's a PTA, they would have rainbow flags everywhere, and it would be all the propaganda all over the school. But whenever there was a PTA meeting, anything where students had their parents come in for anything at all the teachers would take all that stuff down so that it wouldn't be visible when they got there.
There's a lot of deception in this, and I'm not in a position to get too specific, but the schools have been doing such things as I said before, secretly affirming and using someone's name that they want reflecting an opposite sex or pronouns, and keeping that a secret from the parents. So I can see that a lot of the schools would take these things down. I'm sure a lot of them don't, just because when I go into various school board meetings and speaking at different schools, I can still see plenty of this stuff up that they're not hiding it from.
So if you go back to the irreversible procedures, that, because we were talking about when kids become adults, they don't get to experience all the things that a normal person would that didn't go through these procedures. So we have the double mastectomy ban in New Hampshire now, right?
Yes.
So, and the reason why we have something like that is because if somebody gets a double mastectomy and they decide they aren't trans and they do want to have children, or, I mean, I guess there are trans people that do have children, but they won't be able to. If you have a double mastectomy, that means you can't breastfeed your child when you have them, right?
It's absolutely horrible. And I have a friend who's a detransitioner, Prisha, and she was just delighted that she didn't know she was going to be able to have children. Well, she got pregnant, and she was just thrilled. And she couldn't breastfeed, of course. And that was very sad, and she was upset about that. But what no one had warned her about is that the breast milk got trapped behind her chest.
Mm-hmm.
Now, after you have a mastectomy, they reattach your nipples, but they're just decorative.
Mm-hmm.
So this milk had no way of getting out of her chest. And she said the pain of that was worse than the labor, and no one could relieve it.
Wow.
Now, I'm glad that we've banned it in New Hampshire. I think most of these operations were happening in Massachusetts, and they'll continue to be. And there's nothing stopping people from going to Massachusetts for these things. But what it says is, as a state, we reject what the American Academy of Pediatrics and the other major medical groups are telling us, that we're not deceived by any of this. Laws teach people.
Yeah. I've seen some people that have posted that they're scared of living in New Hampshire now because they have a trans child and that they feel like they have to flee the state. And I don't think that I don't think that these laws that are passing are out of hate or bigotry. I think it's out of concern. And that what we've seen happening has been getting out of hand all across the country and in other countries as well. So,
well, I would be concerned about the perspective of a mother who raises her son as her daughter and insists on him getting these treatments. What I'm saying is I don't think these mothers are particularly clear-headed who are now saying, oh, I've got to leave because I'm persecuted. They probably don't make rational decisions in other aspects of their lives.
Did you ever see that? I don't know. I think it was a documentary. I don't know if it was a series or not, but it was about the transgender family. It was families with transgender children. It came out probably 5 years ago, I think. I think they followed around 4 different families, and they all had transgender children.
I think I may have missed that one.
It was pretty good, I would say, because it was fairly objective. They had people on there that there was one family. It was a mother and a father, and they had a boy, and they were raising the boy as a girl. And over time, the kid just kind of didn't want to participate in it anymore, and the mother and father ended up getting divorced. And the boy started living as a boy again. And at the end of it, you could tell which parent was pushing it on the child, because the father was saying, if you ever wanted to become a girl again, I would accept you. And the mother had said, if we ever have to deal with this again, we're going to see a therapist and get him the help that he needs. And that was a real hopeful ending of the show, I thought, because, I mean, obviously you had a parent that was promoting it and another parent that was kind of going along with it but didn't really agree with it, and it was like a tug of war, and which ended up in a divorce, unfortunately. But the child at the end was able to live like a normal child. This is before they started using puberty blockers and putting them through any sort of therapy that could be irreversible.
That's a tough situation to be in when the parents disagree. And unfortunately, we live with sanctuary states now. I know that Maine is one. I wouldn't be surprised if Vermont and Massachusetts were too. But Colorado is one of the worst ones. And what this means is if you and your wife have a dispute about the custody and about the treatments, one parent can take the kid, essentially kidnap the child, and move to Colorado. And Colorado will not cooperate with any sort of custodial ruling. That parent will get to keep the children for the specific purpose of medically transitioning him.
That's terrifying. Do you have children?
I do. I have 2 grown daughters.
I couldn't imagine that. Not being able to see your kid to begin with, and to know that they're being brought across state lines to get this irreversible surgery or irreversible treatment, and they're too young to kind of advocate for themselves, and you're the one that would be the one that would advocate for them. You got to feel so helpless in that situation.
It's an awful situation all around, having your child essentially kidnapped by.
Yeah.
And I suspect the parents that are doing this, they may not be altogether well in other areas too.
Mm-hmm.
They may have some other emotional concerns. The ones that are taking away the kids. It's also from talking to parents who've lost children to this movement. It's horrible too, because if a child isn't entirely satisfied or happy with his or her transition, part of the transgender creed, and there is a very strict creed that goes with this, is it's because the people in his or her life weren't sufficiently affirming. So if you lose your child to another parent, and that parent medically transitions or flees to another state, and you grieve, you're just going to get piled on. It's all your fault. You should have affirmed this kid. You put this child at risk of killing him or herself. So it's horrible too, that you're not in a situation where you can mourn publicly or get help. You have to pretty much keep it to yourself. Or if you're trying to keep some sort of relationship with a child, even if you're waiting to be an adult, then you stop fighting. You have to keep your mouth shut about these things and not further alienate and try to go along with some of these lies.
Yeah, I've faced some pushback when it comes to the boys compete in girl sports argument, as if you supporting your daughter not being pushed to play with men on a sports team or share a locker room with a man, that you're basically just attacking. I mean, they are children. You know, if they're under 18, they're still considered children. But if it's a transgender girl, which, you know, a biological boy, that you're being mean to that child. And I don't have anything against any children, especially if they're a transgender child. That's not the issue. It's the issue of your I would call it mental illness is starting to affect the lives of others. And the way that they're treating that mental illness is by telling other people that they have to conform to it, which I think is one of the biggest issues with this. I don't really care if somebody wants to be transgender. It's up to them. It's your life. You can live it however you want. But when you start forcing other people to go by your pronouns or adhere to your mindset of you're a boy now, or you're a girl now, you're a man now, you're a woman now, well, then you're telling other people what to think. And that's where it first got mucky, I feel like. And that was my first pushback on it when this all started, was I don't care if Bruce Jenner is Caitlyn Jenner anymore, but Caitlyn Jenner is still Bruce Jenner to me. And to have to accept that, or else you're a bigot, is wrong. And that's where they've weaponized it.
This gets back to the gender identity laws and why they were so important to this movement. as I said, that they wanted to have gender identity to be an immutable trait. That's why conversion therapy would result in suicide. That's the story. And conversion therapy is saying, hey, Dad, I think I'm a boy. Well, you're not. Conversion therapy, right? So, but once they did that, it's immutable as skin color, then they could push the whole narrative that discriminating against someone who's trans-identified is the equivalent of bigotry against a black person. So, and that's the way they're wired to, they're programmed to believe these things. So not letting a boy who identifies as transgender into the girls' locker room is the same thing as not letting a black person play in sports with a white person. That's the narrative that they've set up for themselves. And it's very popular with social activists, progressive activists that like to stand up for marginalized groups. That's a big thing. So here's a brand new marginalized groups that we can push through.
Yeah.
So and if you and this is saying, if you look at some of the recent judge rulings too, that's the way some of these judges are looking at it too. That you like the pink wristband case. What they're saying is it could be someone saying something really, sign saying something really nasty about a black person in the group.
Is this was in New Hampshire?
Yeah.
This was last fall?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it was a year ago that was going on. And that's the way that I don't know where it is right now in the legal process. I think it's on step 2. But that's the way a lot of judges are going to look at it who are transgenderists, who believe all these things. But what I didn't hear enough when people talk about not having boys in girls' sports, you don't have to have any treatment at all to be transgender. So any guy could say, I'm a girl and play. But what they did is, what the trans lobby did is they looked for guys that took on more female features from the puberty blockers and the hormones. And what's really awful about having them playing in girls' sports is we all become complicit in a horrible lie.
Yeah.
As I said, you can't say, I'm not going to stand up in a school meeting about a kid and say, this kid has a micro penis and no sexual feelings and will never experience orgasm. This isn't something that I want to promote. Much less the high risk of cancer, stroke, the heart attack, that these boys that are putting on girls' teams, and they're like use human weapons for this cause, they're the ones being harmed the most.
So what do you do on a daily basis now? You're an activist for this cause. And you said that on your way up here, you stopped at one of the other towns nearby, and you held up your sign to promote what you believe.
And talked to a few people, and the sign said was, "There's no such thing as a trans child."
What was there any reception?
Yeah, a couple of people liked it, and one man came over to talk to me for a little while and gave me some support, and I was only there for about half an hour, so that was pretty good. I work full time and sometimes a bit more than that, so I can only get out on weekends usually, and so I make it a point to get out at least once a week to those. And sometimes if there's a Democrat or a leftist political rally, I'll go and attend one of those to talk to people too.
Yeah, because it was a video that you had posted when I messaged your wife that I think you got smacked in the head with a sign.
Yes, and the police did arrest that person. That's sad. I really don't want that to happen. But lately, when I first started doing this, there were people that would talk to me. But now assault seems to be getting more frequent. I mean, Beth got physically attacked in Manchester in June. I think that a month before, I had someone throw water at me when I was standing out in this public square in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Especially with the suicide myth, it's a license to hurt someone. So that's something that happens. But the main thing is they don't want to answer the question. They don't want to discuss what is a what is a transgender child? What's a gender identity? What's a girl? What's a boy? And they don't want to defend what's happening to kids. Their job now is to shut down conversations any way they can. So then we've had people come up with signs and sandwich us in. That's pretty common, shouting and intimidating us the best that they can. A lot of profanity. What's probably happening the most in a lot of settings is a lot of people are trained in something like active bystander training. And what that means, whenever they see a conversation, they go and disrupt it. And it could be something as subtle as, Craig, funny weather that we're having. If they see someone engaged with me, just changing the subject. And I've seen that done at the State House by an executive counselor and some of the politicians. Just make sure that conversation doesn't happen. Another one was a situation. I was at a Milford Pride event, and I was standing outside on the sidewalk, and a man came over to talk to me. He said, I'm just curious, because I always knew that we always had these effeminate boys when I was in school, and I'm wondering if the transgenderism explains it. So we were having a pleasant conversation, and a woman came up to him and said, "Get back here. We are not engaging."
Oh, wow.
Or people say, "Do not engage." They'll look at us and say, "Do not engage, do not engage." And another one is just shouting us, "Trans rights are human rights," getting a chant going so that try to disrupt any conversation. No one at any level just talks about these issues.
Have you ever changed anybody's mind about this?
It's hard to tell. Because I don't think you're going to have a road to Damascus conversion where all of a sudden with one talk someone changes their minds. That people are going to hear it, and a few people are going to ask questions, and then they might think about it or look at some resources later. Some of the things I really hope for is sometimes I've gone to places where there's troubled teenagers that have talked to me. I mean, I'm thinking about the Exeter UFO center. There was a group of girls came up and said, "We're trans," and they were a group of girls. There was nothing indicating that they were uncomfortable with their sex or even wanted to bust the stereotypes. And so they, after swearing at me and my wife and all that, they settled down, and then they heard it, they listened. So, and fortunately, my wife was there to talk about some of the effects about it, because I can't talk about the effects of testosterone with a girl, a teenage girl. I don't want to do that. So, will they look into that? Will they think about it? But one of the biggest reasons I'm going out is, as I said, I couldn't get my billboards up, right? And at the same time, it was Twitter. Twitter booted me off because of at the behest of an employee of Dartmouth Health. Facebook, no way. Just having these discussions. My billboards aren't there. At first I was just holding a sign that people are going to see it. They might get mad or whatever, but they're going to talk about it. That people are going to discuss it. And most people know this is wrong. And it'll give other people the courage to stand up and just discuss it and ask the obvious questions. And I'm pretty sure that I've accomplished a lot of that from the feedback that I'm getting.
Do you think if they never took your billboards down that you'd be doing this right now?
Yeah, I don't think I would be doing it right now. It's not something, I'm a pretty anxious person. Once I'm on the street and talking to people, I'm fine. But when I'm going there, anywhere, I got a knot in my stomach. I think of other things that I could be doing and often should be doing, because, I'm trying to do this with a job and then a house to take care of too. So any hobbies that I have are pretty much just put aside. So I don't think I would have gone that route if I didn't have to. And also when I started doing it, even going out on the street, seeing how people were trying to silence me, showed me how much more important it is. And then going through, I was meeting more detransitioners and having some friendships with them. And then I feel like, and they say, when they see my pictures of me going out, "Thank you, Stephen." And it's like, after all they're going through, I can't come up with an excuse for me not going out.
Man, if all they did was just let those billboards be up, then you wouldn't even be continuing it. Then
You know what's really nuts about this thing, and I realize, and this gets back to the contradictions and the hypocrisy about it. These were billboards promoting a book.
Yeah.
Irreversible Damage, and it was a book by a well-respected reporter who'd had, it was based on an article she had published in the Wall Street Journal. It was a book. And the same people that I see at the State House, they're protesting these book bans because the library has to have all the books in it that promote their religion, this cult. And they could never, they just can't conceive of the contradiction of actively fighting me just promoting a book and then saying book bans, you're all Adolf Hitler.
That's wild. Oh, man.
Or getting back to that, they say, censorship is bad.
Yeah.
How they have to shut me off.
But they don't want any discourse on the subject.
Right. And so one of the videos that I shared with you is I was just talking to someone, and I almost always wait till someone says something to me, and then I'll stop and talk. And maybe they're swearing at me and say, "Why do you think I'm an asshole?" or whatever. And then we'll have that conversation. So I don't just go and talk to someone.
Is it on that thumb drive?
Yeah.
That one?
Yep.
Why is he doing this?
How do you feel about the First Amendment right? Should I be able to talk to people without you stepping in the way? My other question is, why are you people so afraid that push the stuff of conversation? Like, what's a boy? What's a girl? What's a gender identity? What I get constantly is people blocking the signs, which is better than people getting in my face and swearing. But why can't we have an adult conversation about this? Why do you shut down conversations?
See you, State Rep.
What are you afraid of, Representative? That's and what happened is what I expected.
All he's going to do is block us.
I was talking to someone on the street. He started talking to me. And he literally shoved physically his way between us and did this so that conversation wouldn't take place.
14-year-old girls.
And he won't talk to you.
Why do you think that's a good thing?
Right.
I see. Okay.
Don't engage with
Don't
that.
engage.
Well, thanks for talking to me.
And he swore to protect the Constitution.
He will protect the Constitution.
But he blocked my husband's path from moving down the sidewalk.
Does the Constitution protect the right to have open conversations in the street without someone blocking you? And the reason you do this is all you have, is to shut down conversations.
Because he's inches
You know
away
that
from
a boy
me.
can't be a girl and a girl can't be a boy. You know that what's going on is wrong, so this is what you do, right?
That's it.
Steve, I can take pictures of you too,
Of course.
if that's what you'd like.
That's why I'm here.
We'll just stand here and we'll just take pictures of each other, if that's what you'd like.
Well, what I'd like to know is why it's okay to sterilize 10-year-old boys by giving them puberty blockers. You advocate for these policies. You must have good reasons for doing so. Can you tell me why? Or are these things indefensible? Can you tell me what a transgender child even is? Or is it just boys and girls that are being lied to and permanently mutilated because they don't fit stereotypes? So I go to the hearings, and what I hear is moms will say, I knew my son was my daughter. I knew that I had a transgender daughter because literally she refuses to play with trucks, so she can't be a boy, right? Or I've heard two stories from these moms of so-called transgender kids where the boys made dresses, one out of blankets and one out of tea towels. So these kids are put on puberty blockers at Dartmouth Health, which puts them on at 10, which will chemically castrate them and destroy their sex lives, destroy their bones, hinder their intelligence, their cognitive development, and that's okay with you. All you've got is silence to defend these policies.
He's got nothing to say. He can't defend it.
No,
Nothing to say. He votes to harm children.
Is that your wife?
He can't defend it.
Yes. So that's it. At every level, and that isn't all the way up through the top experts at the American Academy of Pediatrics. When they go to their conferences, they won't let people discuss their policy. It went through without any discussion or debate. So it's all at every level. It's about coercion to stop people from speaking up or even asking questions, trying to make sense of this.
When you make those videos, are you using your cell phone?
Yes.
You need a GoPro. It'd make it a lot easier for you.
This is something that just in lost wages has cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars. And, I don't make a whole lot of money, so I've got to keep my overhead down.
Well, that's basically the protocol right there. So you start talking to somebody, they get right in the middle of you. I've seen that happen about other topics in other settings.
So they'll silence me any way they can. That was also the same place where someone else came and just hit me in the face with a sign. Mm-hmm. And there were also just really loud trans rights or human rights chants. There's just the whole idea is whatever it takes, do not let people talk about this. What was cool, though, is one of the Democrats, this was an anti-Trump event, and one of the women came up and thanked me, said, I admire your courage. What's happening to kids is wrong. So there are people among them that hopefully giving them the courage to speak up.
Oh, you're planting seeds for sure. Every time you're out there, if there's a group of 30 people, I can guarantee you that even if it's just one person that sees your sign, they'll hopefully go and look up what you're talking about and see that there is another side to this conversation. It's not one-sided. They want it to be one-sided, but it's not. And I think that more and more people are standing up to it because it did seem like it was getting a little ridiculous at this point, where the New Hampshire legislator feels like the need to pass a double mastectomy bill ban for minors. I mean, that's a huge operation to be doing to anybody that's under the age of 18, and unless there's like a real medical life-threatening reason for an underage girl to get a double mastectomy, there's really no reason at all not to support that legislation.
Well, of course, I've heard the arguments from the other side, including the medical experts.
And what do they say exactly?
Sure. The argument number one is this is a private decision that's made with the consent of the parents, the child's doctor, and a whole team of healthcare providers, like any sort of counselors, too.
But based on gender-affirming care.
Right. And what gender-affirming care only goes one way, because it's a crime to tell a girl that she might be a boy, or to say, why don't you like being a girl? What are the problems? Because there's a good chance you may have been a victim of sexual assault or just bullying or teasing or just hating the changes that her body's making at that time. So exploring some of those things, or just the pornographic culture that we live in, that being objectified. So it only goes one way. The other thing that Dartmouth Health has testified at the meetings about suicide. That one of them, physicians, testified at a committee that the suicide rate for transgender youth is as high as 40%. That's ridiculous. And then she backtracked it to eventually say, well, it's the attempted suicide rate. And what that comes from is an online survey from the Trevor Project, an activist group. And they solicit these answers from kids that are told that they're suicidal constantly. And it's something that a lot of people don't know is 15% of all girls, high school girls, will say that they attempted suicide in the last year. So it's very common to have suicidal ideation and also to reflect back at the year and say, oh, I almost killed myself. Fortunately for us, we know that the suicide rate is really rare. It's less than 0.1% for trans-identifying youth.
And how do we know that?
Because it's been studied most thoroughly from the world's largest gender clinic in England, which was Tavistock, which had 15,000 patients. So they looked at all of the data for all of the years, and there were 4 suicides. 2 of them were people that were waiting for treatment. 2 of them were being treated.
So do you feel like that organization is actually being honest about it compared to other ones?
Well, I read the study by Biggs about it, and it was it was a study of the actual data. You can look at it, and also other governments too. I want to say it was Finland, I think, did another study too and came up with the same numbers. And there because they've got socialized health, it's easier for them to keep track of the numbers. There's also an incentive in a country with socialized medicine to try to keep overall costs down and not do ineffective treatments.
But Canada's going crazy with it, aren't they?
Yeah, Canada's got some problems. But another reason we know it's true is this came up in, are you familiar with the Scrimeti case?
No.
The Scrimeti case, it was, I don't know if it was Alabama or Tennessee, had passed laws like ours banning hormonal interventions, puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones. So the family ended up suing the state. And again, I want to say that I think it was Alabama. And the question is are you interfering with a private medical care by blocking these treatments? And during the hearing, Chase Strangio, who is arguing on behalf, she's transgender, she identifies as a man. She was asked, isn't it true that the suicide rate is really low based on the Cass review of the evidence from the United Kingdom? And she said, yes, admittedly, it's very, and thankfully, it's very rare. So the activists themselves in the Supreme Court admitted that it was rare. And locally, at one of the more recent hearings I was in, and when I brought this up, the head of the local ACLU, or the spokesman for the ACLU for New Hampshire, said the same thing. The suicide rate is low. But this gets back to the treatments, and that parents are being blackmailed with this. And there's one physician, Frances Lim Liberty, who's an endocrinologist for Dartmouth Health. She wrote an op-ed where she talked about a child whose parent wasn't on board with these treatments. And she says the child is going to turn 18 in a month, but I'm not sure he'll survive that month. Did she tell the parent that? Because it seemed like she was under that sort of pressure. The article doesn't say that explicitly. She also says that she promises the child that she or he will get the hormones as soon as he or she turns 18. So there's a conversation going on. So if the parents aren't on board, they work around them. And they've testified to that. So this whole story about this is a decision made with the parents after a lot of thought. It's affirm only, as you said. It's the affirmation model. If the parents aren't on board, they'll get coerced, they'll get browbeaten, they'll get pushed aside and blackmailed.
That's terrifying as a parent.
And it's also true that based on the information that I have, that I sometimes get asked, do you think you know more than the experts, the pediatricians? Based on what they've written and seen, I don't think they read any of the studies that are warning of the danger of this. And this is every systematic review. I mean, it's not only the Cass review in the United Kingdom, which is a review that incorporates, I think, 3 systematic reviews. It's also reviews in Sweden and Finland. I talked about WPATH before. They commissioned a systematic review about, do these treatments help young people? And they hired John Hopkins to do it. And they didn't like the results that they were getting. So they stopped the review, buried the findings, and forbade anyone from the review team to publish any of the findings. And we found that out through the investigations that came with the Scrimeti case.
So somebody that's listening to that, what you just said, where could they find that information?
About
them burying that information.
I would, if you Google, it's the WPATH files, an investigative reporter, and I should know his name, the WPATH files, he took all of the leaks from WPATH and he published them.
Leaked files from WPATH reveal widespread medical malpractice on children and vulnerable adults at Global Transgender Healthcare Authority. Newly leaked files from within the leading global transgender healthcare body have revealed that the clinicians who shape how gender medicine is regulated and practiced around the world consistently violate medical ethics and informed consent. The files, which were leaked from within the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, were published today by the U.S.-based think tank Environmental Progress. WPATH is considered the leading global scientific and medical authority on gender medicine, and in recent decades, its standards of care have shaped the guidance, policies, and practices of governments, medical associations, public health systems, and private clinics across the world. So,
what I was talking about in addition to that is the discovery that came along with the Scrimiti case. In the Scrimiti case, the Supreme Court decided that states can regulate gender medicine for children. So if someone were looking this up, the key words I think would be discovery, Scrimiti, WPATH, and Johns Hopkins. If anyone wants, I can send them a link to these documents.
Are these on your website?
I haven't updated for a while, so I couldn't swear to it. But it's very easy to get a hold of me through Twitter. If you just send me a direct message, anyone who wants that, and I can find the data for you.
Oh, so it's PDF you can download too. So do you feel like people are waking up to this?
A lot of people are waking up to this. I mean, the fact that when I started doing this, the biggest problem that I had was, other than being censored, is everyone else just didn't care. You know, they cared about their pickup trucks and their fishing trip and their trip to the grocery. And how does this affect you? My usual answer for that was, well, I'm not a psychopath. Or people just didn't know what was going on. They didn't understand. Now everyone has a good idea what's going on. And we've got restrictions on this in at least 25 states. So that's a good thing on these treatments for minors.
I would say that I think that one thing that woke people up was watching girls lose to boys in sports. And there's been videos that have come out where you can just see like there was one, I think it was Massachusetts, where there was like a basketball team, and I think every player on the female side was a male, and they were just dominating on the court. It's silly to watch because it's like, how is this happening? How are people allowing this to happen? And it is happening. And who was the one girl that spoke out against it? She was one of the first ones.
Selena Sewell?
I think she competed against the swimmer.
Riley Gaines.
That was one that was big. That one really brought a lot of attention to it. And people started really...
Leah Thompson with his women's bathing suit painted. That was quite an image that really got through to people, yes.
Yeah. Once you really put it on display like that, then people start looking at it and saying, okay, this is a little out there. I mean, I think people want to be sensitive towards it.
The issue that we're seeing too is you're going to see the liberal states are doubling and tripling down on that, and that's human behavior. That one of the laws of cognitive dissonance is if you have a really unlikely belief, and we're talking about religious beliefs, and someone presents you with clearly evidence that clearly dismisses what you believe, clearly contradicts it. What do people do?
Double down.
They double down, and they'll try to silence you more, and that's what we're seeing is the cognitive dissonance, and that's why you're seeing. I've been in situations with the LGBT Courage Coalition. I went to a dinner that they had in Boston and Cambridge, and then the mob was there to protest. And there is absolutely demonic. The things are swearing and shouting, and there's signs that this is just a crazed mob. So they're just losing it more, trying to defend this too.
And that doesn't help them.
Yeah, in the big picture, it probably doesn't. The question is it such an established religion in these states that it's going to stay that? It's going to stay that way. And the part of the problem is a lot of this is driven by men who identify as women. Now, for years and years, everyone recognized, and I'm a little bit older than you, that if a man was going around dressed as a woman, he had autogynephilia, that it gave him some sexual excitement to dress as a woman. And now we've turned that entire group into a minority class, a marginalized group, and given them massive political power. Well, you can't have transgender adults unless you have transgender children. So if they need to have you pay for their tracheal shavings and their breast implants, they're going to die, then why wouldn't that be true of children?
A tracheal...
Getting rid of your Adam's apple.
That's a thing too?
Oh, yeah. In Colorado just passed a law that you pay for all of the things, your cheekbone reshaping, you're getting your forehead back, stuff I would never think of, endless operations to try to look like a woman.
Wow.
But if you took away transgender children, then they couldn't really argue that this is an immutable situation. They'd have to say, well, there's some element of choice about this. You have to be, the whole argument is I've been born this way. If you're born this way, there must be transgender children that need these treatments too. So they need transgender children as proof of concept. And part of big fantasy, I talk to a lot of, one of the things I get is, have you ever talked to a transgender person? And probably me more than most people by far, because they'll come up and talk to me, and those are often productive conversations. And a lot of them have a fantasy that if they had that treatment when they were children, then they would be beautiful women today, the men who aren't quite passing. And so they need this. It's a vicarious fantasy that this is that girlhood that they never had. And so this is a very powerful political force. And the Democrats, they're a big voting bloc for the Democrats. So I don't think that I'm going to outlive this movement.
No,
I think it's going to be around for a long time. It's also just such a good grift that even if you got rid of it, I think it would keep coming back.
The medical community makes a lot of money off of it.
It does. As I said, we've got hundreds of clinics right now. You turn people into permanent medical patients with the hormones, and then the operations are endless. There was a young woman who died recently, who because of the results of a phalloplasty, and she said she made videos. Because she was promoting all of this, and this operation cost $500,000.
Wow. Of
other people's money, of course. So huge money. In any case, those things rarely turn out well, and she ended up getting, among other things, the sepsis and then kidney failure, and then leading to death. By the way, those are they give you a lot of anecdotes, but they aren't telling you about the ones that aren't making it.
Is there a statistic on the complication rate when it comes to these surgeries?
No one's keeping track.
No one's keeping track. They don't want it.
It's deliberate. I mean, something like that would be like the Boston Globe and locally the union leader, that people like doing stories with anecdotes about specific people. But these are the situations they aren't covering.
Not touching them.
People just disappearing.
Wow. That's really sad. That's just, like I said, I do think that more people are waking up to it. I think that for a long time people wanted to be sensitive towards it, and they don't want to be called a bigot, and that's why a lot of people are silent about it. but the more and more they go after people's kids, I think people start really getting defensive about it. I know that is something that I worry about.
That's the trap that I run into people, including a friend of mine, that his daughter was socially transed, as I mentioned, by the doctor.
Mm-hmm.
The doctor was secretly affirming this gender identity, and
the doctor. How does the doctor do it?
When you take a child to the pediatrician, at least past a certain age, the doctor asks to speak with the child in private. And then the doctors have a protocol about asking the children about their gender identities. And they're pushing the affirmation model. And that's where these discussions take place.
So don't let my doctor talk to the kid alone.
It's a tough one. The people that he feels betrayed by the people that he trusted most, the teachers, school counselor, the local doctor from a Catholic network. So that was pretty awful. But what happens is you're really hoping you're not going to be alienated from this child.
Right.
And then once the testosterone will change a girl's personality completely. You end up with someone unrecognizable, and they get entirely indoctrinated. There's a very strict creed with this religion. They're very thoroughly indoctrinated. So you're watching someone disappear before your eyes. But they don't want to speak out against it publicly. There's so many people hurt that know this is wrong, but they feel like they can't speak up because they don't want to be what cults do. When someone doesn't go along with a cult is they cut you off. That's one of the first things a cult do is remove you from your family. So if you don't affirm, you're cut off. And sometimes I go to I look at the Reddit pages for these groups. Like there's a Reddit it's called FTM, female to male. And they look for advice. My dad questioned this, and the answer is cut them off, cut them off, cut them off.
Damn. And then so parents will go along with it to an extent just so that they can continue to see their child.
Yeah, they'll use the name, they'll use the pronoun because they don't want to lose contact for the rest of their lives. And then what they're thinking too is, if I'm not, how can I help this kid if I'm not trying, if I'm not part of their lives? And the dilemma is, okay, once you start using the pronoun, then you're complicit in this harm that's come to your daughter. And I say daughters because mostly it's girls that this is happening to. And almost all of these girls, we know from the research that came out of the Tavistock Clinic that led to the Cass review, all of these girls have something wrong with them, sometimes many of them, that at least a third of them have significant autism. About half of them have symptoms of autism. But also high rates, of course, of anxiety, depression, sexual trauma. And of course, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And what's crazy about that American Academy of Pediatrics policy, and it's a long name for a policy, but if you just put gender policy, American Academy of Pediatrics, you can look at it and read it pretty easily. But it says if kids have these problems, that these mental health problems, they're probably caused by the gender identity not being affirmed. So in other words, the depression isn't, you don't hold off and treat the depression or the anxiety or even the autism, because all of these things are caused or even made worse by the gender dysphoria. So you can't hold off and say what a reasonable person would do. Well, let's treat this mental health disorder first. This poor girl was sexually assaulted 8 months ago. Is it likely that she doesn't want her breasts for that reason? They will not hold off.
People do a lot of self-harm to themselves when they're sexually abused like that.
They do. And if you look around at some of the photos that people post on the online photos, as you can look at them and see all sorts of, from a girl that's showing off her new mastectomy. That's a big thing, showing off your mastectomy and your mastectomy scars. You'll often see cuts in other parts of their bodies. Mm-hmm. And the fact that they've been self-harming doesn't cause any hesitation. Now, my friend Prisha, the detransitioner, she talked about this, that she she was suffering with anorexia when she got secretly set down the path affirmed by her doctors, and she was being treated for anorexia. So she asked her doctors for two things. I want liposuction, and I want you to remove my breasts. Of course, they didn't do the liposuction because you wouldn't do that with a person with anorexia, but they removed her breasts, and that makes sense to them.
Wow. This is disturbing. This is very disturbing that this is even happening like that. And it what was it, 80 years ago, they were giving people lobotomies, because they felt like that was what you did when somebody that was mentally ill. And I think in 80 years from now, we're going to look back at today and we're going to really question what was going on in society that allowed this to get so out of hand.
I hope so. I hope there's a return to sanity. Unfortunately, people like to talk about history and, we're going to be judged by history. History is what got us here in the first place.
How so?
Well, 20 years ago or 30 years ago, we weren't doing this to kids.
Mm-hmm.
Now we are.
So this is the first generation that's happened to kids.
Yeah, that we can't. What I'm saying is we can't. The whole idea that the arc of history, that history arcs towards justice or whatever, I just don't believe it. I think it's people going out and doing hard work. Mm. The other concern that I have is people counting on a pendulum swing.
Mm.
I'm waiting for the pendulum swing in North Korea and in China. You can't count on these things. And people need to get out and they need to read up on what's happening and they need to speak up. And you don't need to go through and read all of these studies because it comes down to the question of what is this boy-girl thing? How can a girl be a boy? What is a boy? At a very basic level, it doesn't make sense.
So where would you recommend somebody start if they wanted to really learn about this from an objective point of view?
Anyone with children, I would start with reading Abigail Shrier's Irreversible Damage that was published 5 years ago. It's very easy to read, and it's a great place to start that. I'm hesitating because the things that I read, I had to do a lot of research when I was in college. So the minute when I started doing this and people started quoting studies after me, I went directly to the studies. There's also, if you just type in the CAS review, what you'll get is a brief summary. It'll take you from the English health services. It'll bring you to the CAS review, and that'll give you an executive summary of these things. And you can read the actual report, which is perfectly readable too.
If you were to talk to a person that was all in on this, what would you tell them? Like, what do you tell them to? What is the first thing you say to get them engaged in a conversation?
I usually end up asking them the question. That's I go out with statements with my signs. Mm-hmm. Well, children don't need gender identities. There's no such thing as a transgender child. No child is born in the wrong body. And that's always my conversation starter. They'll say that's not true. Mm-hmm. I say, okay, what's a gender identity? And you're asking some questions about that. You can show that it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You can get into, a lot of people get sidelined with the research, and this, as I said, this is a religion with a catechism, and a lot of them are people that really memorize the catechisms, and they'll start quoting the statistics, like the 1%, or the story about everyone who goes through this they're anxious, they would have killed themselves in the suicide, and there you have to do a little bit of your own research, which is easy enough with a Google, but I wouldn't get bogged down in those things. If people want to speak up about it, first of all, they need to figure out what they're willing to do.
Mm-hmm.
There are some people that won't stick their necks out for anything. And you speak out of this, you'll probably get some pushback. You may well be punished. So you've got to figure out what risk you're willing to take and then take that step. Now, it might be having a discussion in the family. It might be something that's really important is going to your school board meeting or even your aldermen, your selectmen meetings because boards of health will sometimes promote these things too. They'll come up. Or if you see a lot of gender affirming stuff in your schools, just say, gender identities are entirely imaginary. You can't tell me what they is, but to speak up. And of course, there's not everyone's going to go to a legislative hearing. But making sure that you're contacting your legislatures and knowing that let them know where you stand on it. And what's most important is protecting your own children. And as I suggested, starting with Abigail Schreier's irreversible damage and finding ways to protect your own kids from this. And especially if you have a girl who's a misfit girl, those are the ones they're picking up on, autistic children.
Do you think they're targeted? Like that it targets those types of kids, troubled kids?
Of course, I can't really read people's minds, but there's a doctor who provides a great portion of the research that supposedly supports this, and his name is Dr. Turbin, and he wrote an article about how autistic symptoms are actually caused by untreated gender dysphoria and unaffirmed gender. So he's essentially saying that this treatment will cure autism or at least alleviate it. So would you consider that targeting autistic kids? I have an autistic friend in Colorado, and he is trying to start a movement saying, yes, they are very much targeting us, that it's disproportional, and they want to keep us helpless, and they want to make us part of a dependent voting bloc, part of their clientele.
Is it harder for autistic people to advocate for themselves? Could that be why?
Well, autism, by definition, is a disorder in communicating.
Mm-hmm.
So it will always be harder for them to advocate for themselves. The other issue, there's a lot of variations within autism, but we have all, I think, met autistic people. And have you ever won an argument with an autistic person?
No, I don't think I've ever had an argument with an autistic person.
No, they'll memorize a set of facts, and they'll memorize it thoroughly. And they have difficulty with something called theory of mind, understanding other people's perspectives, and they're rigid thinkers. So once they're pulled into this and they're indoctrinated, it's very hard to get them out. And then it's compounded with they never had a feeling of belonging. Now they have a feeling of belonging, and there's a whole culture for men and women, for boys and girls, that goes along with this, that gives them a sense of tribalism. So all of these things make autistic people vulnerable to this.
And the other group that is, would you say that women, girls are disproportionately targeted, not targeted, but disproportionately trans as well?
We know that more girls, many more girls, are being identified as transgender. And that's one of the things that there was a whistleblower who's head of the LGBT Courage Coalition, Jamie Reed, and she worked at a gender clinic that hardly saw anyone, and she knew something was up. That back then it was just pretty much boys. And then all of a sudden it's a flood of people, and it's girls. So it's girls that are getting pulled into this over the internet. And as far as the targeting, there was an incident that my wife talked about that she got more information about under the Freedom of Information Act at one of the Nashua schools. And what a group did that was promoting this stuff, they had at a side table during lunch, they had pizza. And then they were giving out things like copies of the Gender Unicorn.
The Gender Unicorn?
Yes.
I've never heard of that.
Oh, goodness. And we'll get back to that.
Go ahead.
But if you imagine you're sitting in a middle school,
yeah,
which kids are going to be the ones that go over to get the pizza at the table from these nice visitors?
Which ones?
Well, the kids that are probably having trouble finding people to sit with, the people that feel like they're misfits, people that are giving them attention. And disproportionately, girls, and especially girls with these mental health problems and autism, neurodiverse, are going to want that more. And we especially see this happening to girls when they reach the puberty, and puberty is really hard. And one of the questions that Prisha talked about, one of the questions they asked her when they were determining whether she was transgender is, did you like puberty? Now, I don't think most girls particularly enjoy puberty.
I don't think I want anybody asking my kid that.
But that's a symptom. You probably don't want them teaching about the gender unicorn either, but there it was.
So what is the gender unicorn?
Well, I don't know if that's something that's worth pulling up, but it's a symbol that shows no one can tell you what gender what gender identity is, or even what gender is. So they came up with the gender unicorn. So you can see that
the gender unicorn.
And the gender includes a gender identity, which is different from gender expression. Sex assigned at birth, which is in all our textbooks now. And this is kind of funny that it says, the one that they handed out, I guess it's a more recent one, it said your genitals rather than sex assigned at birth. But what's really funny to me is people will say that gender identity doesn't have anything to do with sexual orientation, right? But if you look at the gender unicorn, it very much does, right? You see it right there.
Wait, say that again? I'm sorry.
People will tell you that in conversations that gender identity has nothing to do with sexual orientation, being gay or straight. But their gender unicorn that they teach to kids says otherwise.
Physically attracted to men, women, other, sex assigned at birth, male, female, intersex, gender expression, feminine, masculine, other, gender identity, female, woman, girl, male, man, boy, other genders, emotionally attracted to women, men.
Do you get an idea of what gender and gender identity are now? Having reviewed this chart, could you define it?
I'm more confused now.
It's just a bunch of gobbledygook they stirred together.
Is that all they want to do is just confuse kids? Because, I mean, it's easy to do when you show stuff like this to them. I mean, gender's a social construct, but here's a bunch of treatment to make you conform to one gender. It makes no sense to me.
What's gender?
What is gender? Is it a...
So it's a word that I don't use, and I would recommend other people don't do it, because I've seen so many conversations where one person will be using gender to refer to sex, and the other person will refute gender regarding the stereotypes, is what it boils down to.
So gender is a stereotype. Sex would be more biology.
That's when I boil it down to. That's what it looks like. I avoid using the word gender.
And isn't that how they describe it too?
Or
did they used to?
You will get, if you talk about gender, they will just go in circles. They will give you gobbledygook. And that if you look at the American Academy of Pediatrics definition of gender identity, it'll say someone's internal sense of self as being male, female, or neither. Something like that. All of this is gobbledygook. And I don't think it's so much that they're trying to confuse people, but my friends so often disagree with this, in that they just, behind this, they deny that there is an objective reality.
So they show this to kids at school?
Yes.
There's a coloring book. So they transstudent.org/gender, and there's a coloring book that you can print off. Definitions: gender identity, one's internal sense of being male, female, neither of these, both, or another gender.
Now, and that's what you get back to what people ask, and that's why I carry my sign saying these things. Okay, what's a gender identity? And they're talking about something like that. But I'm a man. As far as I know, I've always been a man. So how could my internal sense of being female mean anything? I could only fantasize about being a female.
And
I can only imagine it. That's an internal sense. So this is circular gobbledygook. That's just meaningless.
that's exactly what that is.
But this is what our entire public policies, our schools, our medical associations, this is what it's all based on.
Jeez.
And I think it's a denial of objective reality. That's why you hear sex is on a spectrum, that you can't, when they were talking about laws protecting girls and women's private spaces, are you going to have to check everyone's genitals coming in, that it's really difficult to know what sex someone is, and it's on a spectrum? They're trying to blur objective reality. That's what they're trying to do, because they want everyone's subjective reality to be yours. And that's why whatever imaginary pronouns I have, I'm going to force my subjective reality, my fantasies on you. You've got to join my little cosplay.
See, if I'm in a bathroom and a trans man walks in and looks like a man, sounds like I mean, I don't talk to men in bathrooms, so I wouldn't even know, because most men just go about their way. But nobody's really gonna. If you really do look like a man, you have a beard, or you don't have breasts, you dress like a man, you sound like a man, there's probably not going to be an issue. You're going to go in and you're going to go out. I don't think that that's even the problem here. I think the problem here is if there's a man who is a trans woman or identifies as a woman, and they're going to use a bathroom, and because I've seen them before, I've seen guys your age who are trans women, and they're clearly a man, and they have long hair, but they got receding hairline, and they have breast implants. That person may think that they're a woman, and they can think that they're a woman. That doesn't really affect me, but I don't want them in the bathroom alone with my daughter. That's the problem. Like, that is where I kind of draw the line. When I go out in public with my wife and my kids, when my son needs to use a bathroom, I go into the bathroom first, and I check the stalls to make sure there's no other men in there. Same thing with my daughter's using the girls' bathroom. My wife is going to go in there and check the stalls to make sure there's no men in there. That's the problem. So if they really do think that we're going to be checking everybody's genitals, like that's not it here. You're making it. They're making an extremist argument for something that's not that extreme.
Well, what they were really doing throughout the legislative hearings was threatening people's daughters with genital inspections by bringing this up, saying that's the way that you would have to do it. They're putting up that image. And at one of the hearings this year, that two activists stood outside the women's bathroom by the I don't know if it was in the State House or the Executive Building, and they were dressed up as police officers, and they were handing out cards saying, report to so-and-so for a genital inspection.
Yeah, well, they have to make a fantasy out of it. Like, that's not going to happen. That they think that we're going to create some fascist government based off of that law where people are going to be getting general inspections going into bathrooms. It doesn't, that's not a reality. That's a fear tactic. It's not real. It's not true. But if you're a balding man with breast implants going to walk into a girl's room, somebody's going to stop you. And this gives some sort of legal recourse to it. There's tons of videos out there of grown men going into girls' bathrooms, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. And I think that there was one in there was one of the gyms. I think it happened in New Hampshire, I think, where a woman was complaining about a man in the women's changing room. Like, if you go to a gym and you go to the locker room, people are getting changed in that locker room. Like, men do not belong in a girl's locker room at a gym. They don't belong there.
Well, it gets back to the gender identity law. That if we believe that you aren't defined by your physical body, but by this spiritual gender genie that somehow occupies your body, this gender identity, then trans women are women, right? And that's what our law says. We have a gender identity law, so that we pass that. So if a man says he's a woman, then he's a woman. And the law says that this is defined by, and then it lists stereotypical things. And then I think it ends by saying, or any other evidence. All a man has to do is say he's a woman, and he's a woman. So he can use a woman in this room.
Have you ever heard of the book, The Return of the Gods?
No.
I wanna... So it's from Jonathan Cahn, and it's a few years old, but not 2022. So he talks about paganism and how we're leaving. I don't know if you're religious or not, but how that our society is our society is going back to a time before we worshipped one single God, and that we worship false gods and pagan gods, and like the god Ishtar was a gender fluid god that believed in a lot of this stuff. And he has a really good portion of the book that talks about the gay rights community and its association with pagan gods, and this idea that it's just that there's a social mindset that's going back in time and starting to revisit these beliefs where gender is fluid and that you can be a man and you can be a woman. And Ishtar and even Aphrodite, I believe they're the same one in different civilizations. That this idea of gender fluidness goes way back to Sumeria, and that this has happened over and over again, and it's the absence of a singular God in our society.
Yeah, I have heard that the discussion, and it is a pagan religion, and it's if you go to these hearings, the liberal churches just empty out. They bring their congregations in, and they bring all the clergy they can in. And this is from the same group that says separate church and state, separate
Right.
church and state. And they will use like religious arguments all the way through that. In the story of James and the eunuch all of a sudden becomes transgender, as if he decided to get castrated by the Romans in order to confirm his identity. They'll make it. And if you drive around anywhere, you'll see these churches with these transgender flags out, that in the absence and the collapse of Christianity, that this has risen up, that people are naturally religious. And it's also, I would argue, a child sacrificial religion. These are rituals of child sacrifice. And it's a return of, within Christianity, and related to that, Gnosticism. And Gnosticism was this idea that you are this spirit inside you. There's this godlike part of you, and your body is just a meat puppet, just this awful thing that you're dealing with. And that's transgenderism. And when people say, I was born in the wrong body, where were you before you entered this body? What could you be apart from this body? So there's a fair amount of mysticism in this.
I'd be very sad if one of my children came to me and said that I was born in the wrong body and I don't feel like I am who I should be, just because that is the body that God gave them, and they should love themselves and respect themselves. And to see that there's young people being influenced by doctors and teachers and people that you should be able to trust with your children, it's kind of enraging, because they're teaching them the exact opposite of that if they're promoting this sort of ideology on them, in my opinion. And And you got to think about how many people that have been basically sterilized through these treatments. Not only is it ruining that person's life, but there's future generations that aren't going to be around now because of it too. If you can't have children, like that, if you have one child and they come home and they say, I'm transgender, and then they want to start transitioning and they go through with it all the way to the point where they can't reproduce and have children of their own someday, that's a whole lineage that's completely gone.
And trans activists will turn that argument against you pretty quickly, and sometimes they'll, even though I don't bring that up. Why are you concerned with children's fertility when their lives are at stake? And is that all you want kids to be around for, is breeding for the population? And so of course they've got a whole fantasy built around that.
But that's what we're made to do. You're supposed to reproduce and continue on your genes. You're supposed to keep. That's the whole point of living, is to have children and then they live. I think there's something like 4,000 people for you to be alive today. Have you ever heard that?
No, I'll have to go back and do the math on that when I get home. But they've been all immersed in The Handmaid's Tale. It was a propaganda where women are just used for fertility. So they use that argument. Why do you care about someone's fertility? Well, first of all, it's important, and it's just one thing. Now I've got a friend who's a detransitioner who went to my church. Who's been speaking out, and she didn't start till she was young. I think she started with the hormones when she was 18. And she went on to have, the hormones led inevitably to a hysterectomy because it causes the atrophy of it. She wasn't aware of that. And then she detransitioned. She's happily married now. She loves children, and she can never have children.
That's sad. Oh. So your website, Sidewalk Steve?
Yep, sidewalksteve.com. And the easiest way to reach me is going to sidewalk_Steve on Twitter. If you just type on Sidewalk Steve, you'll see it all there.
I saw a lot of good statistics and a lot of information on your website.
Yeah, things are happening so fast. I might need to update that. Do we have time to talk about the other clip I brought in?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Which one is it?
These things are in order. It should be the second. Go to Manchester, and it should have the word podcast in it.
Manchester Pride Walk podcast?
Yep.
It's the way that they want.
So a 15-year-old can consent to having her breasts removed.
If her parents and her doctor say that that is okay, then what is it on you to say that they can't do it?
And it's okay with you if people destroy kids' sexual function with puberty blockers, a 10-year-old kid. They can choose that, a
If
permanent
the doctor
change.
and them and their psychiatrist and their parents say that it's okay, then it is none of your fucking business what they do.
But every systematic review says these things don't help
It does
people.
not every systematic review. You're a fucking
Name a
stupid
systematic
liar.
review that says this is okay.
There is plenty of evidence to say.
What? Name one systematic
You're a
review.
stupid asshole.
Can you name
He's a
one
stupid
systematic
asshole.
review
You're
that says
shaky.
these things work?
You're real shaky against
You
Sidewalk
can't.
Steve. Because I don't know them off the top of my head. All I know is that all these people
Not
here
even one.
that are having a good time, it does not affect you and it does not hurt you. Nothing here hurts you. Why do you care so much about other people not doing the things that you want them to do?
Because I know people that have been permanently harmed.
No, you
I have
fucking
friends.
don't.
No.
You don't have any friends. You
This-
have no fucking friends.
This stuff killed my
You have
niece.
no fucking
My
friends.
niece is
dude.
dead because of the
No,
testosterone.
you have no friends. I guarantee
Is
you.
it okay with you?
When you die, there will be no one at your funeral.
Is
because
it okay
have
with
no
you
friends.
Wow.
if a 13-year-old gets her breast cut off? Is that okay with you?
What is the reason her breast got cut off?
They told her she was a boy. That's
Oh,
why she
they
was
told her
unhappy.
she was a boy? Maybe she told them that she felt like she was a boy, and her doctor and everybody said that. They don't cut their breast off, you stupid twat.
Tell-
At 13 years old?
Tell Layla Jane. Tell Layla Jane she
Tell
didn't have her
Layla
breast
Jane,
off.
you fucking
Layla
stupid
Jane.
piece of
Tell
shit.
her that she didn't get her breast cut off.
Tell Layla Jane that the puberty blockers are gonna stop all the little kids from reproducing, guys. This is what you sound. You sound like a fucking idiot, dude. Go harass other people. Let's go harass some more people.
So the auto-generated captions were a little off. He's saying all the little kids won't be able to reproduce. Layla Jane's a detransitioner in California who was put on puberty blockers, I think, at 12 and then right into the cross-sex hormones, and they gave her a double mastectomy at 13.
Wow.
And he's saying that these things
They don't happen. Because
So
if we just
Layla-
say that it doesn't happen, then it didn't happen.
Yeah. So what that guy did is he was in our faces the entire time doing that sort of thing. And
Did he know who you were before that?
apparently not.
No.
No.
Does your sign say Sidewalk Steve on it?
Yeah, it did. And he said Sidewalk Steve, but I don't think he knew people would be seeing the video.
Yeah. I mean, those are the people that don't want to have a conversation about it. They've made up their minds, and there's no negative repercussions to any of this stuff, in their opinion.
Well, it's also possible that they know that this isn't defensible and this is wrong.
And they're just gaslighting.
And that's the cognitive dissonance. Just silence someone. What he was trying to do is intimidate me by mocking and physically getting up really close, following us around inches away, waving the flags in our faces. The whole point is they do not want this discussed because at some level, all of them know that this is nonsense. This is all make-believe.
Yeah, I think you're right. Are there any other of these? You got quite a bit here that you brought. What else would you like to cover on this?
I only brought those two.
Okay.
For this, yeah.
Okay.
But anyone that goes through, there's gobs of videos on my Twitter. That's usually where I post them.
So you go every weekend?
I try to get out somewhere at least once a week, usually on the weekends. And then often there's an event that I'll go to during the week.
Do you have a donation page for any of this work?
I do. It's on the top of my Twitter page. It's the Ko-Fi Sidewalk Steve. So if I did get a few donations, I could upgrade some of that equipment. Also, if someone gave me $300, I'd get to the American Academy of Pediatrics conference in Denver. I've got a place to stay.
When is that?
That's the last weekend in September.
Okay, so you need $300 by then?
Yeah, if people came across, I'd love to go and protest that because those are the people most responsible for what's happening are the American Academy of Pediatrics.
I think that should be possible. So anybody listening to this right now, you should go on Sidewalk Steve's Twitter account and give him some money. So anything else you want to cover?
No, thank you. I just want to encourage people to find some way of speaking out. Almost everyone that I see, I mean, the great majority of people I talk to are against this, but the majority of them aren't speaking up. Find some area where you can speak up, whether it's at home, but especially in public. Your school board, the board of aldermen, even sending an email to the school board members so that they know someone if you're afraid to speak up in public, and at the State House.
Well, I want to thank you for coming here because everything that I've seen from you has been from first-person video that you've posted, and it's good to see you on camera and discussing everything that you know because, I mean, you got so much knowledge about this that you should have some sort of long-form platform where you can get more of an audience that people can hear you, and it's good to see you face to face and to hear you talk, and not just have somebody yelling over you and trying to hit you with signs and abuse you.
Well, for those who want to see me face to face, something I'd like to do more of is stand with other people in their communities. I've got a lot of signs. So if anyone wants to peacefully stand, grab one of my signs, have some discussions. I'll drive wherever you are in New Hampshire. We can work out a schedule.
All right.
So other people want to stand up in public, and you have a lot of good conversations.
All right. Steve Scaer, thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me, Craig.